Vinland Saga is one of those series that anyone who watches anime knows about or has at least heard its name, but not everyone has watched or read the series. That was the case with me and Vinland Saga until a few days ago, when I finally decided to catch up to the story of what is the most anticipated anime of the winter 2023 season. So I watched Vinland Saga for the first time, and here's how that went. Vinland Saga follows the journey of Thorfin, a young boy living peacefully in 11th century Iceland, until one day his life is turned upside down, and now he is forced to face the horrors of the battlefield and live with the Viking mercenaries. With an ongoing war between the Danes and the English, Thorfin now tries to fairly exact his revenge against the man named Askeladd while being surrounded with violence, horror and despair as the result of wars and Vikings. Vinland Saga manages to introduce the scale of the world these characters are placed in, antagonists that you hate from the very moment they enter the frame, and display beautifully choreographed action sequences with dynamic camera shots, all in the matter of the first few episodes. And the story only really picks up after like the third episode. Vinland Saga is a historic tale of Vikings, the power struggle between nations, and characters which are inspired from real life. Although a lot of the details are fictional, this anime is historically accurate for the most part. Anyone that has watched the anime or at least heard about the story knows that it's about revenge. Seeing the build up to reach that point, followed by young Thorfin's bloodshot eyes and the powerful voice acting as he screams his wish to take revenge in front of the very people responsible for his hatred, is a treat to watch. The story of Vinland Saga though is not about simple petty revenge. It's very much set in a real world of our own past with real consequences. There are no deaths that feel shallow or that come without struggle. There are no objective evil to be exterminated. For the most part, it's a story of humans who live in a different time than us, who possess different worldviews and reasonings than we do. In fact, sometimes there is no reasoning for their violence and warfare, since they believe that to be their purpose. Crimes, brutality and horrifying acts are committed towards innocent and harmless people who wish to live a quiet life, all for the sake of their personal wish to attain power through violence. For all the terrible and truly evil acts that the people perform in this story, there are no consequences, no justice system, and no one to save the poor and powerless. Survival and power are sought after in every place of every time period. But what Vinland Saga showcases is that same greed, but in a very raw, unfiltered, and real setting through the characters and the place they inhabit. It's fucking scary and dark to see Thorfin's life after he's dragged into the mess of the battlefield to pursue the source of his anger and hatred, who manipulates a helpless Thorfin into fighting alongside him. Even darker is the very moment Thorfin is shown to lose any humanity he had left in himself after having fought this whole time alongside other evildoers, which just hurts to watch. But the scariest part is the close resemblance of this anime to our own world, given that the events mentioned are not only historic but also recent when taking into account the grand scheme of things. To think we are only 6 episodes deep by the time so much shit has happened speaks volumes for the greatness of the story, and it somehow only gets darker from here on out. The story of Vinland Saga quickly outgrows itself from being a simple revenge story to becoming a grand adventure, traveling through countries, planning, plotting, killing, fighting wars and so much more. As the story progresses, it becomes harder and harder to support any of the characters, to even begin to justify their actions, or to feel any sympathy towards the cast we follow along. And I mean all of that in a good way, because we're not meant to sympathize with these cold-blooded murderers. All one can do is watch the story go down for what it's worth. Following episode 14, every moment is full of heartbreak, betrayal, despair, and devoid of any hope at all. All of which leads up to a single event that finally gives us a reason to care, characters to feel for, and a moment of hope and appreciation. When those last few episodes hit, it all begins to make sense. The reason all that planning and plotting actually mattered, and a conclusion that finally ended all of our frustrations and despair as a viewer. Almost every character in this series at some point deserves your hatred, but somehow almost all of them redeem themselves as the finale approaches. The characters of Vinland Saga are the strongest point of this anime. Askeladd is the reason Thorfin's life was dragged into a war zone. As an antagonist, every move he makes, every decision he makes throughout this journey slowly changes your viewpoint of him from being a money-hungry pirate, a mindless killer and a manipulator, to being such a complicated personality whom you cannot really hate but instead feel sad for as the ending hits. All of the characters in Vinland Saga feel genuine and real, not only because the writing and character development is great, but also because they are a part of our own history. While researching a bit for this anime, I came across so much interesting stuff about these characters that I was not expecting. Leif Erikson's character and his story in the beginning of the anime are historically accurate. Thorfin was an actual Viking whose adventures have been accurately accurately depicted in Vinland Saga, while the story of his childhood including other events are mainly fictional. Thorkell the Tall was indeed a giant in real life. Askeladd isn't really a historical figure, but is a character of Norwegian folklore. And that's only scratching the surface. There are so many other details and bits and pieces of references in Vinland Saga as a story, and is part of the reason that people praise the manga for. Was I ever gonna go down the rabbit hole of researching Vikings if it wasn't for Vinland Saga? Probably not. And that is part of what makes Vinland Saga so good in my opinion. When you are forced to think about the story even after the screenplay has ended, such stories leave an impact on the viewer. And Vinland Saga clearly left an impact on me. This anime also has a whole lot of thought-provoking dialogue and philosophies which are centered around each individual's belief. And it also does a good job with showcasing the language barrier. And the way that they do it, honestly I don't really mind. But there seems to be a bit of a problem with the newly released second season of Vinland Saga. For some reason, the videos made around the second season are mostly negative, claiming that the anime onlys won't enjoy it or calling it outright trash. Now as far as I can tell from the first 2 episodes, this adaptation is shaping up to be better than the first season in terms of the animation at least. And the farming arc seems fairly promising if the anime onlys are patient with it. I guess we'll just have to see how the story goes from here on out. Anyway, the soundtrack of the first season consists of medieval sounding OSTs, which overall suits the whole theme of the series. The use of CGI was not half bad either, and I personally didn't mind it at all. The animation was consistently good, with every fight scene being better than the one before. This entire story was a one-of-a-kind experience, especially for being an anime. In conclusion, I'm glad I decided to watch Vinland Saga.